Hello, my lovely people, and welcome back to the channel. I am LaQuinta Obeidi. This is Boldness in Christ. On this channel, we pour back into our members with prayers, teachings, and testimonies in order to strengthen them when they're in the wilderness seasons, valley seasons, when they're suffering spiritual attack or spiritual warfare. I am your prayer partner on this journey as we walk the walk of faith and boldness and truth. If you have any prayer requests, please feel free to email me at obeidilaquinta@gmail.com. I will be more than happy to pray for you. Also, send in testimony, guys. I haven't really received a lot of testimonies, but I have received prayer requests. A testimony before I get started today is that this Sabbath, I was able to teach my first teaching in a church setting. My pastor had asked if I would like to teach, and I told him that I would. I have something available. And so it was scary. I was nervous, but I was so fulfilled. It was such a blessing to be able to see God, like, literally in real time, put me into purpose and walk me into what I feel like is a calling. I don't know where he's going to take me from here, but I do feel like it's growth. It's something that I wouldn't have never thought about doing just 5 months ago, right? And so, like I always say, this wilderness season is beautiful because it brings you into who you are and who you are always meant to be in Christ. And I just thank God for the growth. This teaching, as you can tell by the title and the thumbnail, is about escape versus endurance. Now, I did give this teaching on Saturday, on Sabbath. So for those of you who go to my church and watch my channel, this will be a repeat of the teaching. But I do feel like it is important for more ears to hear because it's just one of those things where y'all are well aware of what this channel is about, right? We teach about wilderness seasons. We teach about valleys and suffering, how they're all different. And we teach about it because it is very important to know how to suffer and to know how to suffer well. That's just one thing that people really don't realize go hand in hand with Christ and growth and purpose and alignment. And so when suffering hits, we tend to kind of focus on the grief aspect. What's going wrong? Did God forget about us? But we don't realize the blessing and the fruit in suffering and long suffering. And so one thing you all will be able to say is that LaQuinta Obeidi taught you all how to suffer and suffer well and endure with joy. Even in the midst of the grief, even in the midst of the hard, it's something beautiful forming. And I'm just a proud advocate of that because at one point I didn't realize how important it was to suffer. I didn't realize that suffering is beautiful. And it's a kind of cliche to think of it that way. I mean, not even cliche, it's just kind of weird, right? To think of suffering as something beautiful when we've been told so long that suffering means you did something wrong, or that, it's bad to have lack and all these things. But sometimes it's just a place that really brings you into a closer intimacy with Christ. And it can be a beautiful, joyous thing. And so we have to keep that in mind. Today's teaching is about worldly escape versus true endurance and rest in Christ. It's really easy when prolonged, unfulfilled need for relief turns inward, because a lot of times we look for ways to self-soothe. We look for ways to indulge in the worldly things to keep our minds off of what's going on in our environment, in our minds, in our world. And we know from the previous teaching that that's mental warfare, some of the things that we think about and some of the things that we go through. But true endurance in Christ looks a lot different when you think about suffering from that aspect. So we will be discussing that. A lot of the times when we are in our wilderness seasons, as you all are aware, we can think really dark thoughts. You get to that weariness, you get to that hope deferred. I've talked about it many of times when you can go into thoughts where your mind is causing you to think like, I wish I was never here. I wish I was never born. I wish I didn't have to go through this. I wish I could just go to sleep and never wake up, on into the point where you wish you could just die. And I know that that is a hard topic. So disclaimer, we will be talking about the S word, unaliving, in this video. But I do want you all to know that it's a reality. It's a hard topic, but it's a reality to talk about because so many people have been there. So many people have thought in their weakest moments that they wish they could just do away with all of it and not be here anymore. I myself was one of those people because you can hurt so bad because of the lack and the loss that it's just human nature to just not want to feel it no more. Just find some sort of relief, especially if you're a person like me who don't really seek it in some of the worldly things like drugs and alcohol and all that stuff. And so this teaching is going to teach you, well, when those thoughts come and they arise, what to do about them, because it happens to even some of the strongest people. Even some of God's chosen people biblically went through it. So it's not nothing new for him. It's a reality for him as well, because you have Job in the Bible who wished that he was never born. You have Jeremiah as the weeping prophet that theologians coined, that had went through so much torment and suffering and stuff like that. You know, it talks about him in his own book. You even have a whole book called Lamentations that speaks about grief and sorrow and burden from the children of Israel as a whole. And we're going to start our pretty much foundation off on that. We are going to read Lamentations 1, chapter 1, 20 verse 22. And it says, Lord, see my anguish. My heart is broken and my soul despairs. For I have rebelled against you. In the streets the sword kills. And at home there is only death. Others heard my groans, but no one turned to comfort me. When my enemies heard about my troubles, they were happy to see what you had done. Oh, bring the day you promised when they will suffer as I have suffered. Look at all their evil deeds, Lord. Punish them as you have punished me for all my sins. My groans are many, and I am sick at heart. This is the NLT version, but in your King James version, it says, I am faint of heart. And I want you all to be aware that this is not like a physical medical condition that the author of Lamentations is talking about, which theologians also believe is Jeremiah. But he is talking about a more inward condition involving confusion, grief, and sorrow. And so it's a heart condition. The author is describing an inner condition where he is feeling overwhelmed or exhausted inside. He's burnt out, right? He is losing strength, courage, or hope. He is emotionally weighed down, and he is spiritually weary and feeling powerless or at the end of himself. So there's a lot of the times when we're going through our situations and our circumstances, we can get to a physical feeling where we feel burnt out, but we can also get to a mental feeling where we feel burnt out and into the spirit. And we can also get into a spiritual feeling where we feel spiritually burnt out. We're tired of enduring spiritually. We're tired of holding on to that promise. We're tired of even giving people the benefit of the doubt who we feel don't deserve it, right? And so this is something that is human, that God is aware of, that we will get to. What I want you to know about burnout is when it comes to grief and sorrow is that there is normally something or an event that has happened that has caused you to go into this deep, deep grief and this deep, deep sorrow that takes you to a place where you can think about all these dark thoughts that can come. And I want to keep you from doing that. Some of that stuff normally stems from anger and frustration. And I want you all to remember that anger and frustration is normally a secondary condition, right? It's a secondary emotion hidden by a primary emotion. So sometimes you can, your fear of abandonment can show up as anger. Your fear of rejection can show up as anger, things like that. And you can also experience anger as a primary emotion. Regardless of what the case may be, there are times where God is using our anger and frustration as a time and a place where we are alerted emotionally, okay? So emotions are there for a reason. Anger and frustration alerts us. It cautions us of something that's going on in our environment that is causing kind of anxiousness, or, you know, whatever the case may be, whatever feeling you're feeling. And so it's supposed to alert us to choose a good, positive solution so that that anger and that frustration can, you know, be subdued. However, sometimes we choose that negative human approach, right? Where we choose and decide to react in anger versus use that emotion to try to understand and cope with what's going on with us in our environment. And so we need to learn how to choose the positive approach and not the negative approach. And so there's a lot of people who will tend to choose the negative approach. There's people who have chose to choose the positive approach. In my teaching on Saturday, I used an example of Rob Serling. Now, most of you all may know, if you are a millennial or back father, that he is the creator of the popular hit TV series, The Twilight Zone. And he chose to create The Twilight Zone during a time where he was experiencing anger and frustrations. Because back in the time that he chose to create television, television networks were censored. They weren't allowed to openly criticize war, which was World War II going on at the time. They weren't allowed to openly talk about racism or conformity, power, moral responsibility. They forced writers to soften or remove their social commentary. And so Rob Stone at the time created The Twilight Zone in order to be able to get people to kind of look at these topics and speak on these topics, because he thought it was important to bring it to the forefront, because when things are just talked about and discussed, change occurs. We know this happens to be a pattern throughout history. And so what he did was he created this series to act like a moral courtroom in order for the viewers to recognize themselves, feel unsettled, and ask themselves what would they do in these situations from the episodes, if you all have watched it. And so he didn't want to preach to people. He just kind of wanted the people to kind of judge and see, if this is where you stand, change. If it's not, what can we tweak? What can we work on to make people understand these issues? And that's why a lot of the endings, of the episodes from The Twilight Zone, if you've ever watched it, felt really ironic, tragic, or unresolved. And so I know even as a kid, I was very intrigued by The Twilight Zone. I used to watch it all the time. And even then I would be like, what's happening? I know there was an episode one time where these people were really mean and they were really ugly, and they wanted their father to, I guess, pass away real quick so they can inherit his money. And so he gave them masks to put on. And when they took the mask off later on, they looked like the mask themselves. So greed caused them to endure something for so long, when if they were just trying to do the right thing, these type of situations would happen. I don't know why I remember that episode, but that episode really stuck out because their faces was all disoriented. But that's neither here nor there about the teaching. I just thought I'd bring that up. But there was one teaching of an episode where it was a place called Willoughby, where in this episode pretty much the main character dreamed of this place called Willoughby. It was a beautiful place. It had sunshine, kids running around barefoot, adults calling each other by first name. It was just a beautiful place. And in contrast, the real world that he lived in was upstate Manhattan, New York, in the middle of November. So in contrast, it was very dark. It was very gloomy, really kind of like this shadowy place. And so when he was going through his darkest moments in the episode, he would dream of Willoughby. He would fall asleep on a train and dream of Willoughby. Until one day, everything, all the responsibilities, all of the criticism from his boss and his work environment, his wife not supporting him at home, all these things got the best of him. And he decided that he was going to go into this dreamlike world, which was called Willoughby. And in reality, that dreamlike world was just a figment of his imagination, because later on it showed that he had really unalived himself, right? If y'all ever want to go back and watch that episode, it's on The Twilight Zone, and it's called A Place Called Willoughby. And so I'm telling you all that to say that in this episode, the main character was just really burnt out. He had no relief. He had no escape to go to. Work was hard. Home was hard. No one understood him. And this dream world that he had created was a place of nostalgia. I mean, it wasn't just a place of nostalgia for him. It was a place of rest. And so Willoughby, in that sense, represented idealized refuge for the main character. It was a constructed inner sanctuary where time slowed down, expectations disappeared, and self was no longer demanded to perform. And so throughout all of these kind of things that happen in this episode, you realize that Gart just could not, which was the main character, could not control his life. He just felt like he was seeking this type of rest and this type of relief. And he couldn't find it anywhere. And so all of these like symbolisms and stuff going on in the episode represented just Willoughby being a place where all symbols of performance were removed, but the ending was tragic because it represented peace through death. And the reveal that Willoughby was the name of a cemetery later on in the episode was devastating, but it was intentional because Sterling's message is not that Willoughby was fake, but it's that the desire for escape was really real. And it found its fulfillment in the wrong place. And so this is what happens because Willoughby is not death itself, but it was just a longing for rest that had nowhere else to go. And so just a simple breakdown instead of going into detail. But the core themes of this episode was burnout untreated becomes despair. Longing for rest is looked at as weakness. Society without mercy creates an inner exile. And the want and need for relief or escape can feel like salvation when endurance feels impossible. And that's pretty much how a lot of our lives look when we're going through the wilderness season, when we're dealing with all this grief and all this sorrow and all this suffering. A lot of the times we're in situations and we're placed in situations that there's nothing that we can really do to physically change it. And if there was something that we can physically do to change it, it wouldn't make a difference. It would just make matters worse because the people are going to react worldly too. If we were to react really. And so Sterling's warning in that episode of A Place Called Willoughby was not to romanticize unaliving yourself, but he exposes how quietly it can present itself as kind when there's no mercy available in the world that we live in. And so today, in today's time, we have our own Willoughbys. In that episode, the main character, whose name is Garth Willoughby, was this beautiful place with sunshine and rainbows. But now we have Hustle Cup. I'm sorry, our Willoughbys can include numbing, where we do endless scrolling on social media. We binge watch different episodes all day long, and then we just disassociate from life itself. We recognize these fantasy futures where we tell ourselves that when I get the house, the car, the marriage, the kids, when this relationship is restored, when I get all this money, the promotion, then I will be okay. And in reality, we know that it's not the truth because human beings are fickle. We always want is never enough. And so we also use spiritual bypassing if we are spiritual minded and a little bit more mature in our faith, and we think that if we tell ourselves, hey, if I just pray hard, if I just fast more, if I just shout more and do all the things and read my Bible, then God will hear me and he will change my situation. And we know that that is not the case either. So we kind of try to use that as a way to kind of create a Willoughby, so to speak, of our own. Even in the spiritual world, in the spiritual aspect, then you have your people earthly who are using substances and all these other things and alcohol or whatever the case may be. We even have people using sexual lust and desires to numb and try to forget the sorrows and the things that are going on, as if that's going to help, because when you're done with that, then those problems and issues are still there. So you just made pretty much matters worse, because now you have this soul tie and this sexual attachment along with the problems that you already had before. Anything that we do and seek worldly to fix our situation, it's either striving, it either doesn't work, it's just a coat or a band-aid. And so Jesus says, come to me, all who are weary and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. He says, I come so that you may have life and that you may have it more abundantly. And in this abundance, as spiritual people, as believers in Christ, we are looking and we are asking ourselves, where is this abundance? Where is Christ when it comes to situations where I'm dealing with sorrow? where's the abundant life? Is he really here? Especially when it's been going on for so long. But you have to also remember that in John 10:10, he also states that the enemy comes seeking to kill, steal, and destroy. So there are two things that are happening simultaneously in our worlds. We have the enemy to come and kill, steal, and destroy the life that Christ is trying to create more abundance in. And so what we tend to focus on is what the enemy is doing. We don't tend to focus on what Christ is doing. And the life is more abundant, but because the sorrow is overshadowing that, because the grief is overshadowing that, we tend to not really even notice the abundance. And that's why it's important to get back into Christ, to understand who he is in this season and in this situation, to get back to his feet and to suffer well and endure well. Because when you go seek these, what I like to call distractions or willoughbys, is you get the relief without transformation. You get the peace without presence. You might be able to numb your mind for a minute, but there's nothing really there keeping that peace for you, right? You get the rest without relationships. So I might be able to sleep this off and dissociate and not have to deal with it and act like it doesn't exist. But at the same time, there's no one there comforting me when I do start realizing these problems and issues again, when I wake back up out of whatever delusion I've put myself in. And Christ gives you that relationship. So you always have that comfort there, even though the problems still exist. Willoughby offers silence without truth. Our distractions offers silence without truth. So we may be able to silence our problems and our issues for a moment, but there's nothing there leading us to real truth and real peace. Only Christ can give that. And Christ offers rest without reality, peace that guards the heart inside of pressure, renewal without disappearance. So we're constantly, daily being renewed. I always talk about that daily manna, right? And life, not escape from life, but life in abundance itself. He's coming there. He's meeting you there. And in Matthew 11:28, it states, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." And so notice that Jesus does not say to leave your life, to put your problems down and then come to me. No, he says, "Come to me, all who are weary are not heavy laden," meaning that you have these problems, you have these issues, you have these strongholds. And I'm telling you to bring them to me so that I can carry those things for you and I can help you get the real true rest that you need versus seeking these distractions or these made up willoughbys. Because what we don't realize is that the spiritual danger in burnout, whether it's physical, mental, or spiritual, is that it becomes weariness that becomes despair. And then that's when you start thinking those dark thoughts, and Satan can use you in those spaces when he's like, look at your life, just escape it, just leave it, just come from it, right? He meets you in that darkness, but he doesn't help you out of it. He kind of tweaks what it looks like, just like in that episode of A Place Called Willoughby. He makes it look beautiful. He pushes you into this fantasy world of what it could look like and what it is, but we know that that is fake. And burnout becomes despair when true rest is postponed indefinitely. Pain is spiritualized instead of tended to, and strength is demanded while limits are denied. And so in 1 Kings chapter 19, 3-8, you have the story of Elijah, who is pretty much experiencing the same thing. I'm not going to read it, but go back and read this chapter. Because in this chapter, Elijah has just won a victory. So he wasn't even in the place of loss or lack, right? He had won a victory against the false prophets. And Jezebel was mad. So she told him that by this day tomorrow, or this same day, you will be as one of the people pretty much that you killed, for lack of better words. And so Elijah was distraught because now he has to flee. Now he has to seek refuge himself, right? Because he knows that she's going to send people after him. So he flees into the wilderness. When he goes into the wilderness, he tells God that he's done pretty much with his assignments, that he's ready to die. Now, mind you, he sought the Lord. He didn't take his own life, but he sought God in order to do it. So he still went to God, which is what we're supposed to do when we're having these thoughts, if they come. And so in that, God sent an angel who gave him food, who gave him water, who told him to rest, woke up, repeated it again, and told him to rest because he's going to need this food and water to sustain him for his purpose ahead. Elijah did eat, he did drink, he did rest. When he woke up, he was strengthened for the 40-day trip ahead into the next city that he was going to go to for his purpose. And this is what the wilderness season looks like for us. We go into the wilderness like Elijah did. We may become weak and have those dark thoughts, but we seek Christ, right, in those dark thoughts. Afterwards, what he's going to do is he's going to sustain us, and he's then going to strengthen us, and then he's going to lead us into purpose. So what I want you to realize is God's response was not correction. He didn't belittle Elijah. He didn't punish him, but he gave him care. And that's why it's important to seek him in these moments where we are becoming overwhelmed or we're in despair, because God gave sleep, food, gentle presence, and then direction. God addressed Elijah's exhaustion before his purpose. The same, pattern that I've been telling you all in previous videos that the wilderness leads us into, because it always leads us into purpose. And so remember that longing for rest is not a weakness, but God is going to come through and do everything that needs to be done. Remember, he tells you to abide in me. One removes you from life, but the other one sustains you within it when you go in the positive direction, when you're choosing these positive versus negative directions to go in. And one of the things that we must remember is none of this is new to Christ. Like I said, at the beginning, it's not new, because Jesus Christ experienced everything that we're going to ever experience. Jesus lived in a merciless system. He had to live in Rome, and Rome had no compassion. Religion had no patience for Christ, and crowds consumed him. So even when he was trying to do for people, he was still drained, right? Yet he practiced holy withdrawal without abandonment. And so Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed, which was stated in Luke verse 5 through 16. And so what we have to remember, and what this teaches us, is that withdrawal is not escape when you're doing it right. So we don't want to pray just to be praying because we're hoping God is going to do something. We're praying because we're acting like Jesus. Jesus wanted that relationship with his Father. He did it for relationship. He did it for God to give him the discernment and the wisdom to make the right decisions moving forward. Solitude is not disappearance. Boundaries are not rebellion. So when you're going into this solitude with a long time with Christ, it's way different than disassociating them and just and just acting like the problems don't exist. So he'll give you the wisdom to realize when to say no without guilt, when obedience can be just that, and it doesn't lead to overextension. How to have compassion without self-erasure. So when other people are going through issues and he put you in purpose, but you have not came out of your season yet, you can have compassion for these people. You can teach these people. You can lead these people even while you're still in your wilderness season. And that doesn't erase what God is doing in your life, because he's still leading you too, right? And you can have faithfulness without frenzy. It doesn't have to be making sure I pray 5 times a day. It doesn't have to be making sure that I fast for 40 days or 40 nights. Some of us aren't even capable physically of doing these such things. So we have to be aware of what God is calling us to and asking us to do. The question that you ask yourself is, how do I avoid the negative escape when endurance feels impossible? Because the enemy doesn't tempt us with destruction. He tempts us with relief, which is the willoughbys that we experience. And so we have to remember that 2 Corinthians 12:9 states, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. One of the key things I want you to realize is that God is saying, by sufficient, it means enough. My grace is enough, which means what I give you is enough to help you even when things are hard. So we have to remember, even when things are hard, Christ has given us just enough. He's given us those boundaries, that hedge of protection that we've talked about in previous videos. He will not put too much on us that we can bear. And even though it feels like God these weapons are prospering in this moment, it's not reality. So you can't look at it as such. And so rest is not the absence of struggle, but it's the it's the presence of God within that struggle, not the absence of God within that struggle, right? Isaiah 26:3 says, you keep him in a perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you. And so Christ knows what he's doing. That's why he gets us to a place where we come to the end of ourselves so that we can come to him, right? And so willoughby is what happens when rest is delayed too long and mercy feels unavailable. But Christ is the answer to that longing, not by taking us out of life, but by giving us abundant life within it. So 3 questions you ask yourself if you ever are feeling these dark thoughts and you want to endure a little bit longer. Where have I been longing for rest? Have I been seeking relief instead of renewal? And what would surrender look like instead of escape? And I want you all to remember that peace is not found by getting off the train or out of life. It is found by knowing who is riding the train with you, who is in life with you. Christ is. With that being said, I hope this teaching's blessed you. I hope this, if you are on that verge of like giving up, this causes you to increase that faith and endure a little bit longer, because trust and believe me, God is bringing us all into promise, into purpose, into blessings if we do not grow weary in doing good and continue to go and move forward. And get those thoughts under subjection. We got plenty of videos on that. So please seek those if you need help. With that being said, I love you all with the love of Christ. I hope this bless you. And remember to love on God first, because why? He first loved you. You all have a great and beautiful night. Bye-bye.